Hello and welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. My name is Alfonso Peluso, and I'm an associate teaching professor in the College of Architecture at IIT, the home of the legendary Mies van der Rohe, and I'm adjunct faculty at Columbia College Chicago in the Interior Architecture Department. Shout out to all my students. I hope you're having a great day. We are getting into the semester. It's early in the fall semester, and it's a wonderful day here in Chicago. I hope the weather's great where you're at. Today, we are going to look at Image Sampler in Grasshopper, and I think this one's long overdue. I should have made a video about this a long time ago, but I'm excited to bring it to you today. So here you see an image of the legendary Mies van der Rohe, and I can lower the resolution of that and raise the resolution of that so you can see that image forming. So we're going to look at that today, and you see our outline is here, listed here. Before we jump into the tutorial, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, what are you waiting for? Search me up on YouTube, click on subscribe, click to receive all the notifications. If you're into digital design, there is something for you on my channel, that is for sure. And more videos are coming out soon. Also, connect with me on Instagram at my first name _ my last name, Alfonso _ Peluso. See what I'm up to. I've been doing a lot of AI images, and recently my work has been featured in Mobile Detroit 2050 as part of the Detroit Design Week. So I'm super excited about that. All right, so what's the inspiration for this tutorial? Well, there's a company called Zonner, and they are so well known for making custom metal facades for people like Zaha Hadid and others. And here you see an image of a perforated wall. And I was first introduced to them and their work from the De Young Museum by Herzog and de Morn. And I think this is somewhere in California. And you can see this image. If I click on a larger image of it, you see a lot of perforated metal here. And if we zoom in closer, and I think these are images of trees that are patterned on this facade. And if I move in a little closer, I can see the perforations in the facade as well as these little dimples. So it's a really cool facade that has inspired me to do this image sampler tutorial. All right, well, let's jump into it. So I'm going to start a new Grasshopper file here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to construct a point. Now I'm working at a small scale right now. There's a lot of applications for this image sampler. One of the applications that I use is CNCing this using a parametric drilling method where I can drill holes where all those little dots were that you saw in the image. So I'm working at a scale of small objects, inches. And if I go to DOC for document properties, you can see my grid is set up for a 12 grid line count. Minor grid lines every 1 inch. So I'm going to have a 12 inch by 12 inch area that I'm working in. Major grid lines every 6 minor, and my snap spacing is 1. So when I click OK, you can see that this is my 12 by 12 area that I'm going to work in. And I'm going to start out by making a plane surface. Oh, don't you love all the pop-ups? All right. So I'm making a plane surface, and I'm going to make that plane surface 10 by 10. Okay, because I'm working in a 12 by 12 area, but I only want my image to be in 10 by 10. And the reason for that is when I'm CNCing and I'm screwing down the stock, I don't want to run into the screws that hold it down in the 4 corners. So I want my image to be 1 inch away from the ends. Let's get my bifocals working here so you guys can see what capsules I'm using. So that's the bifocals plugin. All right, so that's my plane surface. And I'm going to use a construct point. Construct point. And I'm going to set that X and Y to 1 and 1. Okay, so now you see it's centered in the 12 by 12 area. Okay, just organizing the definition a little better. All right, so the next thing we have to do is divide this surface so that we can divide it using points, and those points can become center points for our circles. All right, so we're going to divide the surface. Divide surface. And there you see we start to have circles at our center points based on a certain resolution, which is the U and V count, which is right here. So we're gonna organize this a little bit better here. So I'm gonna say, type in SCR for scribble, and this is gonna be my surface to, we'll say, perforate. Okay, and that's going to be all these here. So Control G to group it. All right. And I am going to right click and change its color. All right, surface to perforate. And here are our circles. So I have a U and a V count. This is going to control the resolution. Okay, so I am going to double click and I'm going to put in, I'm going to have one number slider for this. So I'm going to say between 1 and 100. Okay. I'm going to plug that into the U and V. And you see at 1, it's just the 4 corners. And then as I increase this, I get more and more points, which is going to give me more and more circles. All right, we'll leave it about here for now. All right, so that controls the resolution. So if I add a scribble, this is going to control the resolution. Controls the image resolution. So that controls the image resolution right there. And we'll go ahead and we'll just add another scribble here. We'll take our time today. Why not? It's a wonderful day. All right, so this is divide the surface using points. Okay, divide the surface using points, and we'll Control G that, change its color. All right, so next we can introduce the resolution. Or rather, we can introduce the image that we're going to control the resolution of. All right, so this is, we're going to add our image sampler. So we'll bring in our image sampler. And coming out of the divide surface, we have points, normals, and parameters. So what's important here is when we're talking about surface space, we're talking about U and V values. So that's what's coming out of our parameters, U and V values. And these are all coming out as data trees. And I can flatten those data trees out just by right-clicking. So just so you guys see that it's a data tree, if I plug this in, you see it's a list. Oh, it's a list of lists. So there's a bunch of lists in there. And you can see the dashed wire. So it's a tree. So I'm going to flatten it down to one list. So now I get one single list. Okay, so those are my points, my XYZ values. We'll see what we're going to do with those in a bit. That's going to define the centers of the circles. Then we have the normals, and we're going to flatten that out. And then we have the parameters. Those are the U and V values, and we're going to flatten those out. Okay, it's important that parameters go into the image sampler. All right, so I'm going to double click on the image sampler, and there's somewhere to go get the image here. So I'm going to click on right there, file path. there's 3 little dots. I'm going to click on the file path, and I'm going to get the image of the legendary Mies van der Rohe. And I'm making sure my domain is 0 to 1, and I'm going to be matching, we'll see that I'm going to have to match my surface to between 0 and 1, so I'm going to have to reparameterize my surface. Okay. So we'll get to that in a second, the reparameterizing of the surface and domain from 0 and 1. Let's just go a little bit further into the tutorial. So let's get our circles out, or our circle. We'll create our circles. So I'm using this capsule that I've only really used for image sampler, but it's good to know that it's there. It's create a circle using a center, normal, and radius. And that's important because coming out of our divide surface, we have points. That's going to be our center. We have normals. That's going to match the normal here. And then we have our radius. And we're going to get the radii from the image sampler because by default, the lighter values have larger circles. So there's going to be larger circles here and down here in the lighter areas, and smaller circles are going to be in the darker areas. And we're going to swap those in a bit in the tutorial later on. But let's just plug this into radius, and let's get a panel so we can see what's coming out of Mies. Okay, so right now we're seeing RGB values, and we're going to be fixing that. So we don't want RGB values. We want color brightness values. This works the best with color brightness. So if I double click on Mies, I'm going to change the color. I'm going to change this to color brightness. By default, it's RGB values, and that's what we're seeing on the right in this panel. I want to have color brightness. So I'm going to click on color brightness and click OK. Now I have single values that can become radii for a circle. Okay, so points are going to go in the center, and then normals are going to go into normal. And normal is not really doing anything for us. But I want to have this circle command because it has a center and a radius, and I have normals coming from my divide surface, so I can plug that into normal. So normal is going to be in the z direction to a flat surface. That could change on a curved surface. So those circles could start to get orientated to a really complex surface, which could be really neat. But this is just a flat surface right now. And what's happening is our circles are becoming too large for our scale that we're working in. Some of them are, I'm just kind of going down in the list here, seeing if I can find large values. I can sort the list. I can do a sort list. And let's add a panel. All right, so if I go to the very bottom, yeah, we have some ones. Because it's between 0 and 1, that makes sense. Our domain is between 0 and 1, so all of our values are between 0 and 1. But some of these values are pretty large. At 1, you see 1 in circle is really large on this image, or 0.9 is really large. So domain's between 0 and 1 right now. But we're going to want to remap those values to have a smaller domain. All right, so we want to make sure I'm explaining everything thoroughly for you guys out there. So we're going to add a remap numbers. So I'm going to add a scribble. And I'm going to remap numbers. So circles do not overlap. And this is going to have to be a combination of my remap values and my resolution. You'll see how low the resolution needs to be where the circles aren't overlapping one another. Because again, my output is real world output, maybe a perforated wall. So like you saw in the Zonner images with the perforated metal there, we don't want the circles to overlap. So just to kind of remind us of that, that's this one. So we don't want the circles to overlap in the real world. So we're thinking about real world in this tutorial, which is cool. All right, so remap circles, remap numbers so circles do not overlap. All right, so we're going to do that with a remap numbers. And the source is from 0 to 1. Okay, so let's first talk about the values that we're remapping. We're remapping these values that are coming out of Mies. The values that I showed that are between 0 and 1, just above there. So the values that are between 0 and 1. So those are the values that I'm going to map. I'm going to remap. And my source domain is between 0 and 1. That's the source domain of the image. We haven't changed the surface yet to be between 0 and 1. We're going to get there. And we have the target values, which we're going to set in a second. So I'm going to construct a domain. Plug that into my target. And my construct domain for right now, I'm going to use values between 0.010. These are fixed values for now. 0.010, and my largest diameter is going to be 0.25. So a quarter of an inch. 0.25. And we'll see what we're looking at in a second here. Okay, so those are our new values coming out of the mapped values here. Those are going to be between 0 and 0.25. So if I bring the circle radius over, I'm going to plug my map values into the radius. Okay, so much smaller circles. All right, let's turn off a few things here. So why don't we have our circles, and then Shift Control I is the inverse selection, and I'm going to right click on the canvas and choose Preview Off. All right, so we have some circles, but it doesn't resemble the Mies image at all. And I want to get there. And I mentioned that the domain of my surface, okay, so I'm going to add a scribble here. Domain of surface needs to be between 0 to 1. Okay, and this needs to be between 0 and 1 to match the image domain, which is between 0 and 1. And we can see that if I double click on Mies, it's between 0 and 1. X domain, Y domain, between 0 and 1. So those are 0 and 1. So if I do something called reparameterize my surface, that will make my surface the X domain between 0 and 1 and the Y domain between 0 and 1. So I'm going to right click on the surface. I'm going to choose reparameterize, and there we go. We're getting Mies. Okay, we're getting there. But right now what I don't like is the darker values are smaller circles. I want the lighter values. So I want this area over here to have smaller diameters and this area to have smaller diameter. So I'm going to flip my domain start and end. So I'm going to do that. Okay, so now I like that better. It's getting more to look like Mies. It's getting to look more like Mies, I should say. And right now we can control our resolution. So this really isn't real world because the circles are really overlapping one another right now. So real world for this image is actually pretty low resolution. You see those circles are still overlapping, but what I want to change right now is my biggest circles right now are not a quarter of an inch. They're actually a half inch because I have quarter inch as my largest value here, 0.25. but that becomes my radius of the circles over here. So it's actually double right now. So it's 0.25 times 2. So it's a 1/2 inch radius. So I want to make this diameter. So I'm going to right click on radius, go down to expression, and I'm going to change this to x over 2. And I'm going to commit changes. And you're going to see those circles get smaller. Okay, now I can increase my resolution before they start to overlap. So I go to where it's controlling the image resolution, and I raise that value. So I can get somewhere right there. They're starting to overlap a little bit. Okay, and we start to see the image of me. So that's real world scale, so to speak. All right, and you can use color images. So if I choose another image for this image sampler, I'm just going to double click on it, click on the 3 dots. And this is my inspiration from the De Young Museum, the De Young tree. And I'm going to put that in. And you see, it's okay right now. It's not too bad. I'm making sure, if I double click on this, when you're using a color image, don't use the RGBA. You'll get something, but it won't be relative to the image. So if I go to filter, I can change it directly here, or I can go to settings and change it here. So I want to make sure that that's color brightness. Okay, and I can, just to see that image, I can control the resolution. So now we're getting the image of the tree in the forest, so it's a little bit more abstract. Let's get our buddy back up here. Okay, I think that covers everything. I don't know if I missed anything. I didn't even look at our little outline, but there's our outline there. And we covered everything. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. My head's going to pop up in the upper left. Click on that if you haven't subscribed. I'm going to put 2 more videos in the upper right and the lower right. Please like and leave me some comments. Let me know what you like about the video. All right, I will see you on the next one.